It was a boxing rematch in a prison, but not even 2 minutes later, a man with a spin kick knocked his opponent to the ground. He is Oika, the king of fighting. He leaps into the air and kicks his opponent's teeth out. He then used 3 rounds of spinning kicks to knock his opponent to the ground. Oika was ready to welcome victory, but suddenly felt that his opponent was back on his feet. This made him furious. He didn't give his opponent any chance to catch his breath. Instead, he knocked his opponent out of action. In this prison, he was the king of the underground. He has won every fight in the ring with his fierce fighting skills. He is the king of fighting, and the one who runs the prison fights is a plutocrat named Rod. He makes his profits by opening gambling games through live streaming, but Oika's popularity is too high, despite the 1 to 5 odds. But the punter still chose to bet on Oika to win. Rod was unhappy to see his money flowing into other people's pockets. If this continues, he will go bankrupt sooner or later. So he turned his attention to George, the former world champion boxer who had just gone bankrupt. At this time, he was taking some small ads to make ends meet. Rod had his men put some drugs in George's book while he was out. When George returned to the hotel, he was greeted by hard-faced police officers. George was about to embark on his prison career. These guards were about to teach George a lesson for his new arrival in prison. First, they let George take a cold shower on a freezing winter day. But as a boxing champion, he had never been treated like this before. He cursed at the officers and asked them to give him a hot shower. But the officers ordered 2 of his men to go straight to him. How could they be a match for the champion? They were knocked to the ground by George into blows. The moment the alarm went off, George was standing under the cold shower, taking a cool shower, and so George finally had a day to remember. The next morning, he came into the cafeteria and was about to eat. Suddenly, all the people stood up. It turned out that Oika, the prison's fighting king, had approached him. Only George ignored him. He was still eating his breakfast. At that moment, Oika's man approached. He told George to stand up, but George knocked him down with a punch. George got up and got in front of Oika. Then he spat into Oika's cup. Just as Oika was in the middle of his sentence, George poured a glass of water on Oika's face. Oika had never been so insulted, so he went up and kicked the stool and threw George on the table. Fortunately, the guards arrived in time to pull them apart. When he returned, Oika was furious. He asked the warden to arrange a match for him and George. He wants to make a clean break in the ring. But the arrogant George thinks Oika's bad kung fu is just good-looking and ineffective. Oika doesn't deserve to be the champion. Now George just wants to get out of here. But at this time, the plutocrat Rod is called to the prison. He told the warden that if he didn't fight, he wouldn't be able to lead the prison. During the outdoor activities, George saw his roommate being bullied by Oika's men, so he couldn't take it anymore. He rushed up and beat them up. The relationship between George and his roommates slowly became cordial. Oika saw his men being beaten up and came to George in a rage. He wanted to fight with George in the ring, but George didn't care about him at all. Then the two immediately fought, but they were forcibly pulled apart by the guards who arrived. Oika had no place to vent his anger, so he had to vent his anger on his opponent in the ring. Even the referee was kicked by him. Oika then performed a classic backflip. He followed it up with a skillful roundhouse kick that left his opponent unable to fight back. The angry Oika didn't give his opponent a chance. His heavy punches knocked his opponent unconscious. He provoked George with a hand gesture, but George didn't give a damn. After the fight, the warden first gave George a lesson. Then the warden approached him and wanted him to fight Oika in a boxing match, but George didn't give him any face. He was then taken to the stinking basement. The guards gave him a job cleaning the sewers. George again refuses. The guards take out their pocket knives and try to scare him. Suddenly, an old man in a wheelchair arrives and tells George, the most important thing here is to stay alive. George had no choice but to obey the order to clean the sewers. But Oika's men came back for more. But they are no match for the king of fighters. They were knocked out in a couple of blows. The prison guards arrived quickly. They put George directly into the underground water cell. The cold gutters were filled with rats and mice. Soon George could not hold on any longer. Luckily, the old man brought him chicken soup and pills to keep him going. 2 days passed. When he emerged from the water prison, he was greeted by a sumptuous dinner. At that moment, the plutocrat Rod came to him. He told George that if you played Oika in a match, I will let you out of jail. But George is still indifferent. He thought his manager would find a way to get him out. Rod snapped his fingers. It turned out that George's manager had been bribed by Rod. George had no choice but to agree to Rod's demands, because he had no other choice. The fight between Oika, the prison champion, and George, the champion of the world, was finally scheduled to take place. The fight bell rings. After a short trial and error, they began to attack. George is a world champion. his boxing skills were too much for Oika to handle. Oika was quickly losing ground. A series of consistent punches came like a storm. Oika was dazed and confused. George throws a perfect combination of punches. Oika's teeth fly into the air. The unbeatable Oika was knocked to the ground. And just when George thought he had an easy win, Oika is back on his feet. He no longer fought his opponent with just his fists because Oika knows his strength is his legs. He throws a couple of big kicks that George quickly loses control of. Oika lifts up his big knee and hits George with it. He throws George off his feet. Oika then throws his killer phantom kick. He kicks George in the face. George can't hold back. He just wraps Oika in his arms. Both of them fell out of the ring at the same time. That was the end of the first round, but Oika's men were afraid that Oika would lose. So he handed a bottle of drugged water to George's roommate, and the old man in a wheelchair witnessed all this. The second round officially began. At this point, George's eyes were dazed and dizzy. His punches have no power. Oika's timing was right, and he threw a spinning kick that sent George to the ground, unable to move. When George woke up again, the old man told him that he had been drugged that day. George first guessed that his roommate had betrayed him, so he rushed back to the dorm in a fury, but his roommate hanged himself. He only left George a note and said he was forced to do so he died to pay for his sins. Then George came to Oika. Oika, who was eating, was scolded by George before he knew what was going on. George said he was a scumbag. You can't even put drugs in the water. Oika said that I want to fight on my own merit. I am the king of fighting. How can I use such a dirty method? While they were arguing, the warden came out and ordered them to stop arguing. Like George, who was angry, punched him in the face. He knocked the warden down on the table. And so, George was hung on the cold iron bar for a day and a night. Luckily, the plutocrat came to the prison. He saw George outside, almost frouncing to death, and yelled at the warden. Roth said if anything happens to George, you won't be able to work here. He came to George and asked him to fight again. He promised that if George won, he would be freed immediately. Roth said this fight would be absolutely fair and square. If you don't agree, then you will stay in this place forever. George had no choice but to accept the challenge. In the days that followed, George received instruction from the old man. The old man told him that Oika's strength was his legs. If he could control his legs, he would win the fight. The old man then used his own body to help George train. He taught George jiu-jitsu to counter Oika's leg kung fu. After a lot of hard training, the ultimate fight between the two kicked off. At the beginning, both sides fought back and forth, but soon Oika's kicks became less deadly as George dodged. At that moment, George hit Oika with a heavy punch, and Oika landed a spinning side kick, and that's how they locked each other up. End of the first round. At this point, the old man asked George, "Why don't you use the new technique I taught you?" George says, "I'm trying it out." In the second round, they started a new fight. Oika attacked hard. He didn't give George a chance to throw punches and locked George's legs in a big back crotch. George tries his best. After a few quick rolls, George kicked Oika's teeth out. That was the end of the second round. At this point, the old man told George, "If you don't do your best move, you will stay in the stinky sewer cleaning forever." George thought about everything that had happened before. His eyes filled with anger. The fight begins. George met Oika's kicks with his heavy punches. George is then able to dodge Oika's roundhouse kick with no problem at ease. He knocks Oika to the ground with one heavy punch. He hits Oika with a perfect, fluid set of moves that have Oika a bit overwhelmed. He lands a big knee that sends Oika's teeth flying. He then takes Oika down with a big backbreaker and manages to lock his legs. The old man taught him how to do it, and George crushed Oika's knee with all the strength he could muster. End of the match. George is victorious. He will be released from prison and reintegrated into society. And where does our Oika go from here with his almost crippled knee? Will he still be the king of fighters we all love? You can subscribe and leave comments if you have any ideas. Thanks for watching. See you next time.